Chapter 8. The Wonders of Steam. What good is power? Gunpowder and the printing press alone did not make the sort of world that we live in today. It was the invention of the steam engine that first gave man the power to harness a great force of nature and put it to work for him. Before the day of the steam engine, practically all the work of the world was done by the muscles of men and of animals such as horses and oxen. This invention gave to man great iron muscles that never grew tired, for doing all kinds of work. How does steam work? Steam is simply water heated until it becomes a gas. When water in a pot or kettle is heated over a fire, the water slowly begins to change to steam, which rises to the surface in little bubbles and escapes into the air. We say that the water is boiling. When the steam strikes the air, it is cooled again and condensed into vapor. That is, little particles of water floating in the air and looking like a small white cloud. Now, a steam is different from water in that it is what we call expansive. In other words, it spreads out with great force. If a kettle of boiling water is covered and no place left for the steam to escape, the lid will be blown violently off. This is the force that makes the steam engine work. Who made the first steam engine? The power of steam had been known for many hundreds of years before any real use began to be made of it. An ancient Greek named Hero, who lived in Alexandria, a great city of Egypt, more than 100 years before the time of Christ, made a sort of steam engine, but it was little more than a plaything. Hero's engine was a metal globe set on a covered basin, with which it was connected by tubes on each side. At the top and at the bottom of the globe there was a short bent tube, open at the end. The basin was filled with water and a fire lighted under it. When the water began to boil, the steam rushed up into the globe and burst out into the air through the open tubes with great force, making the globe revolve, something like a lawn sprinkler. In the 17th century, when the great discoveries of Galileo awoke a widespread interest in science, a number of men tackled the problem of making a steam engine that would do useful work. An Italian named Porta constructed a curious little engine that would pump water from a tank by forcing steam into the tank. A little later, another Italian named Branca made a machine that would turn a wheel by blowing a jet of steam on blades around the rim. At the end of the century, an Englishman, Thomas Savery, brought forth an engine which developed power by means of steam and air pressure from the outside, operating on a vacuum, a place from which the air has been mostly removed. The vacuum was created by sending steam into a receptacle and then condensing it into water. Savery's engine was able to pump water up from a mine or a well. But it was not used much because it required an enormous amount of fuel. Who invented the piston? Early in the 18th century, another Englishman named Newcomen, working with Savery and a third man, built a steam engine which made use of a piston, a device that had been invented by a French scientist named Papin and used by him in a little engine. Papin's engine, because it was very awkwardly constructed, was not a success. Newcomen's engine was not much of a success either, but the piston was the key which, in the hands of another man, was destined to unlock the power of steam. How did Newcomen's engine work? We shall see now how this happened. Newcomen's engine was a peculiar one. A piston is simply a little disc of metal on a rod, the disc fitting snugly into the inside of a hollow metal cylinder. In Newcomen's engine, the cylinder was filled with steam, and then cold water was let into the cylinder, which made the steam condense and form a vacuum. Then, a heavy pressure would be exerted on the piston by the pressure of the air on the outside, so that the piston would be pushed down very vigorously. Then it would be pulled up by means of a weight, and the operation repeated over again, as first steam and then water were let into the cylinder. So it was really the air pressure and not steam directly that moved the piston. In order to work Newcomen's engine, it was necessary to turn a number of stopcocks so as to open and shut the valves. A little boy named Humphrey Potter was hired to tend the stopcocks on one of these engines. He got tired of the job and wanted to go off and play. Being a bright boy, he fixed up some strings so that the engine would turn the stopcocks itself. That was a valuable improvement. When the piston on Newcomen's engine moved down, it set in motion a large beam which was attached to a pump rod. The engine could make 12 strokes of the piston in a minute, each stroke being capable of lifting 50 gallons of water a distance of 50 yards. The Newcomen engine was more useful than Savory's, and engines of this type were used rather extensively for pumping water out of English mines, especially the coal mines. What was wrong with it? But even the Newcomen engine was very expensive and wasteful. It used 28 pounds of coal each hour for every horsepower. A horsepower is the unit of measurement of the work done by steam engines, whereas later types of steam engines used only 2 pounds of coal hourly per horsepower. A large Newcomen engine burned up $15,000 worth of coal in a year. The result was that it did not pay to use the engines beyond a certain point. A better engine was needed badly, and when a real need for anything exists, somebody generally comes along and supplies it. Who invented the first practical steam engine? That is what happened. A young Scotchman named James Watt made the improvements which have earned for him the title Father of the Steam Engine. For the steam engine that was destined to give birth to a new era in industry was born in the ingenious mind of James Watt. He was employed as a mechanic by the University of Glasgow, his job being the making and repairing of mechanical instruments used in the university's laboratories. In 1763, 13 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed in America, a small Newcomen engine, the property of the university, got out of order. It had been sent to London for repairs, but the mechanics there had been unable to put it in working order. So it was turned over to young Watt. Watt was a very thoughtful and painstaking young man. He did not just tinker with the Newcomen engine. No, he first sat down and made a thorough study of the whole subject of steam and mechanics. Then he began to examine the engine very carefully and to make himself thoroughly familiar with it. He saw that there was a great waste of time and energy in forcing cold water into the cylinder in order to condense the steam and then depend upon the pressure of outside air to force the piston down. Why not, he asked himself, use steam instead of air to work the piston? There were many other problems that he had to solve. For 19 years, he worked over his steam engine. At last, he was satisfied, and in 1782, he patented his engine. How did Watt's engine work? In the steam engine, as finally perfected by Watt, steam was forced first against one side and then against the other side of the piston, pushing it back and forth continuously. Furthermore, Watt, like a good Scotchman, got every ounce of work that he could out of his steam. He put in a valve so that the supply of steam going into the cylinder was cut off when the piston had made only about 1/4 of the stroke, for he knew that the steam, after it got into the cylinder, would go on expanding sufficiently to drive the piston all the way. Thus, he more than doubled the amount of work that steam would do. In short, James Watt, although indebted to other men for some of the ideas on which he built, is the real creator of the steam engine. What was Watt's engine used for? Watt's steam engine had unlimited possibilities. It was not just a contrivance for pumping water out of coal mines. People soon realized that it could be made to do all kinds of other work. Before long, it was harnessed up to spinning and weaving machines, and great mills and factories began springing up all over Great Britain. Early in the 19th century, an American named Robert Fulton fitted a steam engine into a little boat, which sailed up the Hudson River without the help of sails or oars. A little later, an Englishman named George Stephenson built the first steam locomotive for pulling carriages on rails, and soon in many countries, railroads were bringing towns and cities much nearer to each other. Of course, as time went on, further improvements were made in the steam engine. A way was found for making the steam do still more work by forcing it into other cylinders after it pushed the piston in the first one. These were called double expansion and triple expansion engines. They made a great saving in the amount of coal that had to be used. A more recent form of steam engine, and a very powerful one, is the turbine, which operates by throwing jets of steam against bladed wheels. This is the idea that the Italian Branca experimented with over 300 years ago. The modern turbine engine came into use in 1884. Many of our great ocean liners are driven by turbine engines.